This is a Victorian literature lesson from the Harris Federation. As it's in the format of a video, you can pause and rewind any time you like. There will be tasks for you to complete, so do pause when you need to complete them. Make sure your sound is turned up, as there will be narrations for you to follow, as well as readings.
Welcome to Harris Federation. Today we're going to look at Oliver Twist, Chapter 2, Life in the Workhouse. Please make sure that you've got your extract ready and a pen and paper, as you'll want to write notes as you go through. Enjoy!
Today we're going to focus on an extract from Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens. Particularly, we are going to look at the workhouse. So, in your books, look at this image of a workhouse. What do you think it might be like to be born and live in one of these? As a challenge, why might someone write about their experience in a workhouse? Spend some time jotting down your ideas, and when you're ready, move on to the next slide. So what was life like in the workhouse? Well, women, men, children had different living and working areas in the workhouse, so families were split up. To make things even worse, you could be punished if you even tried to speak to one another. Punishments were severe as well. You'd be punished for insubordination, like Oliver Twist displays in the extract we're about to read. Workers were made to wear a uniform, which meant that everybody looked the same, and even when you went outside, everybody knew that you were poor and that you lived in the workhouse. The food was tasteless and was the same day after day and often minimal. The education that children received did not include the two most important skills of all, reading and writing, which were essential and needed to get a good job. The young and the old, men and women, were made to work hard, often doing unpleasant jobs. Children might often find themselves hired out, essentially sold, to work in factories or mines. The extract that we are looking at today is taken from the text Oliver Twist, which was written by Charles Dickens in 1837. The character of Oliver Twist was born in a workhouse in the 1830s in England. His mother, whose name no one knows, is found on the street and dies just after Oliver's birth. Oliver spends the first 9 years of his life in a badly run home for young orphans, and then is transferred to a workhouse for adults. After the other boys bully Oliver into asking for more gruel at the end of a meal, Mr. Bumble decides on a brutal punishment.
The room in which the boys were fed was a large stone hall, with a copper at one end, out of which the master, dressed in an apron for the purpose, and assisted by 1 or 2 women, ladled the gruel at meal times. Of this festive composition, each boy had 1 porringer, and no more, except on occasions of great public rejoicing, when he had 2 ounces and a quarter of bread besides. The bowls never wanted washing. The boys polished them with their spoons till they shone again. And when they'd performed this operation, which never took very long, the spoons being nearly as large as the bowls, they would sit staring at the copper with such eager eyes, as if they could have devoured the very bricks of which it was composed, employing themselves, meanwhile, in sucking their fingers most assiduously, with the view of catching up any stray splashes of gruel that might have been cast thereon. Boys have generally excellent appetites. Oliver Twist and his companions suffered the tortures of slow starvation for 3 months. Alas, they got so voracious and wild with hunger that one boy, who was tall for his age, and hadn't been used to that sort of thing, for his father kept a small cookshop, hinted darkly to his companions that unless he had another basin of gruel, he was afraid he might some night happen to eat the boy who slept next to him, who happened to be a weakly youth of tender age. He had a wild, hungry eye, and they implicitly believed him. A council was held. Lots were cast who should walk up to the master after supper that evening and ask for more, and it fell to Oliver Twist. The evening arrived, and the boys took their places. The master, in his cook's uniform, stationed himself at the copper. His pauper assistants ranged themselves behind him. The gruel was served out, and a long grace was said over the short commons. The gruel disappeared. The boys whispered each other and winked at Oliver, while his next neighbours nudged him. Child as he was desperate with hunger and reckless with misery. He rose from the table, and advancing to the master, basin and spoon in hand, said, somewhat alarmed at his own temerity,
"Please, sir, I want some more."
The master was a fat, healthy man, but he turned very pale. He gazed in stupefied astonishment on the small rebel for some seconds, and then clung for support to the copper. The assistants were paralysed with wonder, the boys with fear.
"What?" said the master at length, in a faint voice.
"Please, sir,
Replied Oliver.
I want some more."
The master aimed a blow at Oliver's head with a ladle, pinioned him into his arms, and shrieked aloud for the beadle. The board were sitting in a solemn conclave, when Mr. Bumble rushed into the room in great excitement, and addressing the gentleman in the high chair, said,
"Mr. Limpkins, I beg your pardon, sir. Oliver Twist has asked for more."
There was a general start. Horror was depicted on every countenance.
"For more?" said Mr. Limpkins. "Compose yourself, Mr. Bumble, and answer me distinctly. Do I understand that he asked for more after he had eaten the supper allotted by the dietary? That boy will be hung," said the gentleman in the white waistcoat. "That boy will be hung."
"He did, sir," replied Mr. Bumble.
Nobody controverted the prophetic gentleman's opinion. An animated discussion took place. Oliver was ordered into instant confinement, and a bill was passed next morning on the outside of the gate, offering a reward of £5 to anybody who would take Oliver Twist off the hands of the parish. In other words, £5 and Oliver Twist were offered to any man or woman who wanted an apprentice to any trade, business, or calling.
Now I want you to look back over the first paragraph very closely. You're going to read it back to yourself. I want you to reread that first paragraph and highlight any keywords or phrases that really tell you about what the place is like. What impression do we get of the boys? What do we learn about food? When you're thinking about these questions, you should then start to think about the big idea in this paragraph. What is Dickens showing us about the workhouse? Take some time to read through the paragraph, more than once if you need to, and then once you've highlighted and annotated that paragraph, then move on to the next slide. Now that you've reread the beginning of your extract and you've started to think about the big ideas, how does Dickens present life in the workhouse? Now you need to put it into a paragraph. So there are three elements you need for your paragraph. You need the what, the how, the why. What? What is Dickens suggesting about the workhouse? How? How is Dickens communicating this view? What methods and evidence is he using? And why? Why is Dickens sharing this opinion? So if you look at the box, I've broken up the paragraph into the what, the how, and the why. The what is written in blue. Dickens presents a negative impression of the workhouse, where the boys are extremely hungry, but food is in short supply. My next step will then be to gather some evidence that proves this. That is what we will do in the next slide. What evidence did you find? Now we come to finding evidence. So our big idea is that Dickens presents a negative impression of the workhouse, where the boys are extremely hungry but food is in short supply. And we needed to find some examples for this. So let's see. The bowls never wanted washing. Oliver Twist and his companions suffered the tortures of slow starvation. They were wild with hunger. One boy was afraid he might some night happen to eat the boy who slept next to him. He had a wild, hungry eye. These were the quotations that I found. Did you find any different ones? The bowls never wanted washing. That was my first quotation that I found. Then I need to start analysing it. So what does that quotation show? It shows that the boys are so hungry that they lick their bowls clean, and the word never emphasises this. Apart from that, I got a little bit stuck on this one. I'll need to think about if I want to use this quote. My next quotation. Oliver Twist and his companions suffered the tortures of slow starvation. What stands out here? For me, that emotive language, they suffered the tortures of slow starvation. The word suffered and tortures gives us great sympathy for the boys. Oliver Twist and his companions suffered. That word and, that conjunction, it was not only Oliver, but his companions too who suffered. And then you've got that alliterative slow starvation used to emphasise the prolonged element of this torture and suffering. I then picked out wild with hunger, and I started to think about the connotations of the word wild. It's quite animalistic, perhaps frantic, and that word hunger, it's their basic needs for food. My next quotation is slightly more sinister, but also with a comical element to it. So my quotation is, one boy was afraid he might, one night, happen to eat the boy who slept next to him. Slightly more comical, but you've also got the idea of cannibalism, humans eating each other. You've got this idea of a predator and prey, perhaps. It's quite animalistic. My next quotation emphasises a lot of what I've already said. He had a wild, hungry eye. This is the boy who thought about eating the boy next to him. So again, you've got that wild being repeated. Again, it links back to this animal imagery. He had a wild, hungry eye. It's as if he can't control his urges because he is so hungry. Again, you've got this idea of the stronger, taller boy wanting to eat the smaller, more tender, younger victim. Using what we've discussed from the previous slides, have a go at writing your own paragraph. I've done the big idea for you. And use some of the examples, the quotations, your own ideas to fill in the second part of the paragraph. You then need to think about why Dickens is sharing this information and this opinion. Spend some time jotting down your ideas and writing it in a paragraph. Pause the PowerPoint to give yourself some time to do this.
How did you get on doing that? Remember, before you hand work into a teacher, you need to make sure it's your very, very best work. So spend some time now reading over your paragraph and really focus on the details. Is your writing clear? Do you need to take anything away? Do you need to add anything? Spend some time doing that.
Now you've had some time to write your own example and look at 2 other student examples, I want you to go back to your first paragraph that you did and redraft it. So look at the ideas from the other students. What did they do that you perhaps didn't do? Upon reflection, how can you improve your own work? So now I want you to redraft your paragraph. That means go over it and make improvements. Write it again with any bits that you think would make it better. Off you go. And that's the end of our lesson today. Hopefully you'll have some more knowledge about the workhouse as depicted by Charles Dickens. You will have enjoyed reading an extract of Oliver Twist and managed to write your thoughts on life in the workhouse. I hope you enjoyed it. Goodbye.